Hello, I hope you're having a fantastic day today. Today, Scotty and I are here to unbox yet another one of the Commander decks for March of the Machine. Thank you very much, Scotty. And yeah, today in Edinburgh actually is fairly sunny. And now, unfortunately, we've been kind of delaying these openings due to having to do other videos, as you might have seen on our channel. But we're still very much interested in finishing up the other two decks that we have left over. So this will be just another one of our reviews where we go in depth on the cards that are inside the precon, what we think about the precon overall, and we scored out of 10 to see how good it is compared to the other decks in this set. So without further ado, let's have a look at Call for Backup. And as a reminder, this deck always includes 100 commander cards, and that's the 99 of the deck plus the commander card. There's a commander display card that's thicker, 10 Planechase cards, out of which 5 are new and 5 are old, 10 double-sided tokens, a planar die, a life wheel, a deck box, a strategy insert, and a reference card, and on top of that you also get a collector's booster sample. Now, Call for Backup is a red, green, and white deck, so this is going to be an interesting one. And yeah, without further ado, let's get cracking. So yeah, we've been really busy. I don't know when this video will go up. Now, here we go. This is the commander deck open. Sorry it took a while. We get, as usual, you get cardboard cutout box, and then you get the contents. You get an envelope, a black envelope with the Planechase cards and the collector sample booster. Then you get the actual deck, the spin down wheel, the little insert where you get a little bit of an explanation about the deck, and you get the tokens and the display commander, the die, which is purple and green. I really like this combination of colors. It's in theme with the commander. And then you get the deck box and some extra cardboard cutouts, and that's it. So there you have it. Now the deck box, as usual, unfortunately will not hold the cards once they're sleeved, but they're very good once you open the deck to have something to hold on to. They're always really beautiful. Unfortunately, Magic the Gathering has a deal with Ultra Pro, which means that they are the ones making the professional deck boxes, but it's still nice to have something extra, especially if you are a new player. And then let's have a look at the strategy insert, which will go over the special rules of Planechase and Commander. You can pause if you'd like. Oops, sorry. And then it gives you a little bit of an insert that explains your commander and how the deck plays. As usual, I've not really looked at the deck or the commander, so this will be a fresh view of the cards inside. And this is the planar die, which is really, really cool. Purple is one of my colors, and this is a nice combination, so that's nice. And I mean, the life wheel, we already know it. And we'll start with the collector's booster sample pack really quickly. As usual, you get an uncommon with a showcase version, and then you can get any of the extended art or alternate art versions, and then you get a token at the top. So let's see, this is Qui Immortal. This is our extended art or variant card, and then we get the foil uncommon Dana Soul Steeper or Dyna, I don't know how to pronounce that, and that's it. Not bad, but not a great pull. And then we can have a look at the Planechase cards as we usually do. Now, Planechase looks really fun, but I've never actually really played it. It does remind me a little bit of the old arena cards that were given out for Vanguard, but let's have a look at the cards. Chaotic Ether is a phenomenon. When you encounter Chaotic Ether, each blank roll of the planar die is a planeswalk roll until a player planeswalks away from a plane. Actually, it's not a planeswalk, it's a Chaos Ensues roll. Sorry about that. Then you get Jund, we've seen it before. It's the Plane of Alara. Whenever a player casts a creature spell that's black, red, or green, it gains Devour 5, which means that as the creatures entering the battlefield, its controller may sacrifice any number of creatures. That creature enters the battlefield with 5 times that many +1/+1 counters on it. And whenever chaos ensues, you create a 2/1/1 red goblin creature tokens. Then we get Bloodhill Bastion. Wow, that is a creepy cool art. Really nice art. Really cool. Which is from the plane of Aquilor. Whenever creature enters the battlefield, it gains double strike and haste until the end of turn. And whenever chaos ensues, exile target non-talking creature you control, then return to the battlefield under your control. Karasha Foothills from the plane of Monsek. Whenever a creature you control attacks a player, for each other opponent, you may create a token that's a copy of that creature tapped, and attacking that opponent, exile those tokens at the beginning of the next end step. So this gives it myriad. Whenever chaos ensues, you may sacrifice any number of creatures. If you do, Karasha Foothills deals damage to target creature. Grove of the Dream Pods, plane of Fabasin. When you planeswalk to Grove of the Dream Pods at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card onto the battlefield and rest on the bottom of the library in any order. Whenever chaos ensues, return target creature card from graveyard to the battlefield. Megaflora Jungle from the plane of Garganticor. Each creature with mana value 2 or less gets +2/+2, and whenever chaos ensues, you create a 1/1 green insect creature token with flying named Butterfly. Oh, I'm a pretty little butterfly. Riptide Island. Plane Dominator. When you planeswalk to Riptide Island and at the beginning of your upkeep, create 2 1/1 colorless sliver creature tokens. And whenever chaos ensues, slivers you control gain haste and get +X/+X until the end of turn, where X is the number of slivers you control. That is a very interesting card. The Great Eyrie is a plane of Tarkir, and when you planeswalk to the Great Eyrie at the beginning of your upkeep, bolster 3, which means that choose a creature with the least toughness among creatures you control and put 3 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever chaos ensues, choose up to 1 target creature you control and up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. Each of these creatures deals damage equal to its toughness to each other. That's not bad. The Golden City of Oraska from the plane of Ixalan Ascend. So if you control 10 or more permanents, you get the city's blessing for the rest of the game. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token, then draw a card if you have the city's blessing. Whenever chaos ensues, you may put a permanent card from a hand onto the battlefield tapped. Towashi from the plane of Kamigawa. Modified creatures you control have trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, draw a card. And then whenever chaos ensues, distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among 1, 2, or 3 target creatures you control. So as usual, these are very beautiful cards. I really enjoy the lore behind them and seeing some of the planes and just overall locations that we've heard before from Magic the Gathering and from the lore. I really love the way that the idea of planeswalking has been implemented here, and I find it really cool. Now, let's move on to the deck proper. Let's have a look at our commander and the tokens, and then we will move on to the main deck. Alright, so our main commander is Brightpalm, Soul Awakener, which is a 4/3 legendary creature, Fox Shaman, for 1 generic, 1 red, 1 green, and 1 white. It has backup 1, so whenever this creature enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature. If it's another creature, it gains the following ability until the end of turn, and then the ability is whenever this creature attacks, double the number of +1/+1 counters on target creature. That creature cannot be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less this turn. That's really nice. And this is in the etched foil. That's quite beautiful. And it seems like it's gonna be an interesting counter deck. So I wonder what fancy cards they might have put inside here to make the counters double. And it's a bit annoying that it only interacts with 1 attacking creature. But you know, it's still pretty good that you can just double the amount of counters on attacking creatures. So that's really good, and also makes it unblockable from little chumps. And then you get the spirit token with the treasure on the back, goblin token, times 4 with 4 slivers. Okay, so that's why you have the sliver card here. That's interesting. We get an elephant token with the city's blessing at the back. Butterfly. Oh, that's nice. I like that. That's such a cool one. I really like that. And the city's blessing again. That's interesting. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes of the deck proper. Where are you? Pull tab, my arch enemy, because I don't have any nails and it's always hard to do yet. Oh, there you go, managed. Okay, so at the front we will find the new cards, the 10 new cards. Let's see how this one goes. Death's Breeder's Champion. It's a 2/1 human warrior for 2 generic and 1 red. It has dash for 3 generic and 1 red, which means that you may cast a spell for the dash cost if you do against haste, and it's returned from the battlefield to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next turn step. So this is an ATB re-enabler. You've seen this on Ragavan. Backup 1, whenever this creature, well, it gives, let's assume that from now on you understand what backup does, and it gives double strike to any target creature, so that's really good. I like this card. On Civil Rest enchantment, non-target creatures you control have Riot, which means that they enter the battlefield with your choice of a +1/+1 counter or haste for 4 generic and 1 red. And then if a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it would deal damage to a permanent or player, deals double that damage instead. Wow, this is good. Very good synergy. And I was expecting to get some decent enchantments to double or synergize with the counters. Then you of course get the Icon Elixir, which we've seen before. It is an interaction with the Planar die and the Planechase ability and just adds for 2 generic. Mirror Style Master is a 3/3 human warrior for 4 generic and 2 red. It has backup 1, and whenever this creature attacks, for each attacking modified creature you control, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of that creature. Exile those tokens at the end of combat. So that can be really good. It is fairly expensive, but when you're doing that ability, you're going wide and you're planning to do a lot of damage. This means that, I mean, for any modified creature, this would be hopefully the whole entire board. You create a copy, and then if you have any attack or ATBs or stuff like that, like for example Bright Palm, right, you can just re-enable it. So that's really good. It is expensive though, so it's not the easiest, but you do have some ramp in green for sure, so that's not bad. Guardian Scale Lord is a 3/4 dragon with backup 1, 4 generic and 1 white. Flying, whenever this creature attacks, return target non-land permanent card with mana value X or less from graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the creature's power. This is not bad actually. It's a reanimate effect in these kind of colors. It's fairly good. You can back it up, and it's a flyer, so that's also very nice. You can give fly, so some evasion to any target creature, and then whenever it attacks itself as well, you can just return cards. This is going to be really good synergy, I believe. Emergent Woodworm. This is a 4/4 for 6 generic and 1 green. Has backup 3. Okay. And whenever this creature attacks, look at the top X cards of the library where X is its power. You may put a permanent card with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest at the bottom of your library in any order. Okay. So this is not bad. It is super expensive, and I've seen a theme here so far. You have the Mirror Style Master, you have the Guardian Scale Lord. They're really expensive, even the Civil Unrest. So I don't know how you would go about playing this. If the whole deck curve is really high, then I would have to haphazard that you need to ramp really quickly, and there are plenty of ways to do that. So if you want to play it that way, great. If you don't, then this is a really expensive card that takes a while to get going. And if you're against opponents that have a commander, for even a commander that has counters on it or counter synergy that instead works much quicker, this is sort of an expensive card. So it depends on the kind of deck that you would use. I wouldn't keep this in the kind of deck that I would build, because I'd want to be more quicker on the board, seeing how my commander is only a forecaster. Path of the Pyromancer, 4 generic and 1 white. It's a sorcery. Discard all cards in your hand and 1 red mana for each card discarded this way. Then draw that many cards +1. Now you get the Wills of the Planeswalker, which we discussed before. This is not a bad card. I mean, it allows you to fix your hand if you are flooding or if you're needing something, but it can be really expensive if you're gonna play it later on when you don't have a lot of cards in hand, and maybe let's say you have this and another card. It's really expensive for something that well, I mean, it gives you maybe 2 mana, or yeah, no, it's just 1 mana in that scenario. Yeah, there are better cantrips, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. Again, it's really expensive. That's the only thing that's keeping me back from it. It's a good card. It's that for 5 mana overall, it's kind of expensive and slow. Conclave Sledge Captain is a 4/4 creature elephant soldier for 5 generic and 1 green. It has backup 1, backup 1, backup 1. This means that whenever it enters the battlefield, up to 3 creatures get the effect, and it can be even the same creature 3 times. It has trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, put that many +1/+1 counters on it. So that's really good. If you have, again, really expensive, but this is a better one, I would say, than the Imagined Woodworm, because this allows you to, you're gonna create something huge. So this is a decent card. I like it. It's not bad. Again, really expensive casting costs. Colonial Hydra. This is a creature Hydra for 3 generic and 2 green, has trample, and when it enters the battlefield, it has +1/+4/+1/+1 counters on it, and whenever it attacks, you double the number of counters on each creature you control, as the +1/+1 counters get double for every creature. This is really good synergy, and it's cheaper than what we've seen so far. Okay, Mikaeos the Lunarch. Okay, I haven't seen you. Human Cleric, 0/0 legendary creature for X generic and 1 white. And it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters. You can tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then you can tap it to remove a +1/+1 counter to put that counter on another creature you control. So it moves your counters around. This is not bad at all. I like it. It's really nice. I mean, in the end, you can just play for 2 and then slowly build up the counters with other synergies and then continuously move around the counters the way that you want them. You definitely want to keep this guy on the board though. You don't want to have him go to face too much. You want to keep him safe. Okay, next up you get the Canopy Vista. This is a slow land. Champion of Lampholt. Human Warrior, 1/1 for 1 generic and 2 green. Creatures with power less than champion's power can't block creatures you control. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under you control, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. This is really good in this kind of synergy deck. And then you get Cinder Gale. So this is another slow land. Dromoka's Command, which is a 1 green and 1 white instant. You choose 2, prevent all damage target instant or sorcery spell would deal this turn. Target player sacrifices an enchantment. Put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature, or target creature you control fights another creature you don't control. This is very simple. It is a very good combination of color commands, so it does everything that you want these colors to do. Definitely something that I would keep. That's the first instant that we see as well, so we can move that here. Okay, then we have the Exotic Orchard. Next up, we have Flame Rush Rider. Now, this is a human warrior, and whenever it attacks, you create a token that's a copy of another target attacking creature, and then that's tapped and end attacking, exile the token at the end of combat, and then you dash it, which is really good. Very high cost for 4 generic and 1 red, but it's a human warrior. It's a 3/3, and you're doing it for getting more ATBs or attack triggers. So again, synergizing really well. Very expensive though. The deck it's gonna be slow if you don't ramp to it. I like it though. Flame Shadow Conjuring is an enchantment for 3 generic and 1 red, and whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1 red. If you do, you create a token that's a copy of that creature. That token gains haste, exile it at the beginning of your end step. That's not a bad ATB doubler at all. This is a good enchantment actually. In this kind of deck, but I mean in general in all kind of decks, it's definitely something that I would use. And if you have any of those enchantments or even creatures like the Elish Norn that doubles your ETBs and that triggers, and then you create the token has another ETB, it's just steamrolls from there. Or even other dash creatures like the Flame Rush Rider. Yeah, definitely this is a great addition. The enchantments so far are being pretty good. Next up, you get the Forgotten Ancient, which is a classic for this kind of deck. It's a 0/3 elemental for 3 generic and 1 green. Whenever you cast a spell, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Forgotten Ancient, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of +1/+1 counters from him onto other creatures. So this is a much quicker, better version than the Planechase card, but it basically it's similar. It's just that whenever you cast a spell, you pump it, and you can move at the beginning of your upkeep any counters to any creature from him. It's really, really, really good, and I'm happy to see it in this deck. Fortified Village. This is another nice land. This is one of those show lands. All right, Fury, same thing. Game Trail, of course. Cavity Township. You tap it to add 1 generic, and then for 2 generic and 1 green and 1 white, you put a +1/+1 counter by tapping it on each creature you control. Very, very good synergistic card with this deck. Genesis Hydra. I was expecting to see a lot of Hydras in a pre-con deck like this one. It has a 0/0 and plant Hydra creature for X generic and 2 green. Whenever you cast this spell, reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put a non-land permanent card with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield. That's really, really good. Then shuffle the rest into the library. Genesis Hydra enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. So this is not bad. I mean, it's kind of the same activation as the first, the huge emergent Woodworm. You shuffle the rest, so that's not bad. And yeah, it's just that kind of card. It is cheaper though, so I would rather play this one than that one. It's not a bad card. There are very good cards out there that you can replace for it, but it's not a bad card to have, and it's better than the other one. Okay, we get the Gyre Sage, which is a 1/2 Elf Druid for 1 generic and 1 green. It has evolved, so whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has greater power or toughness than this creature, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and you can tap to add 1 green for each +1/+1 counter on Gyre Sage. Amazing synergy with this one. Amazing synergy with this deck. Really good choice. Heaven. Okay, this is a double faced or a split card. This is Heaven and Earth. So the Heaven side is an instant for X generic and 1 green, and it deals X damage to each creature with flying. And then Earth, which is a sorcery, is for X generic and 2 red. It has Aftermath, so you can cast a spell only from your graveyard, then exile it, and Earth deals X damage to each creature without flying. So they're very synergistic, or complementary as they say, and it's a cute idea. I don't know that, I mean, it's the best removal in these kind of colors, but it's pretty decent to get some funky removal, and this is definitely a fun one, so that's nice. Next up we get High Sentinels of Arishin. Burst Soldiers, so a 3/4 for 3 generic and 1 white. It has flying, and High Sentinels of Arishin gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it, so hopefully all of them. And for 3 generic and 1 white, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Again, very, very good and synergistic. Oh yes, of course, the Incubation Druid is another one of the cards I was expecting to see here. It's a 0/2 Elf Druid for 1 generic and 1 green. You tap to add 1 mana of any type that on any land you control would produce, and if it has a +1/+1 counter on it, it has 3 mana of any type instead. And then for 2 generic, 2 green, you can adapt 3, which means if this creature has no +1/+1 counters on it, you can put 3 +1/+1 counters on it. So this is really, really good. I like this one. And you don't have to tap him, so you can tap and add mana from himself to add that ability. Inscription of Abundance is an instant for 1 generic and 1 green. It has kicker for 2 generic and 1 green. Choose 1. If the spell was kicked, you choose any number instead. You put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature, or target player gains X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control, or target creature you don't control fights target creature you control. That's really, really nice. Another synergy. I like it. Iron Storm has an enchantment for 2 generic and 1 red, and for 1 generic and 1 red, you can remove a +1/+1 counter or charge counter from a permanent you control, and it deals 2 damage to any target. So this is basically a continuous shock, hopefully, or at least you're hoping on your side. It costs 1 more than just a shock, but if you play your cards right, you can definitely keep doing this effect. And at least if you're, you know, flooding out or in a tricky situation, you can always pump up the mana for this and get it going. So that's not bad. It has very interesting enchantment. So Kessig Wolf Run, and this is land. You tap it to add 1 generic, and then for X and then 1 red and 1 green, you tap it. Target creature gets plus X plus 0 against trample until the end of the turn. That's really, really nice. Next up, we get Kranko, of course, 1/2 Goblin, and it's a legendary creature Goblin. And whenever Kranko Tin Street Kingpin attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, then create a number of 1/1 red Goblin creature tokens equals to Kranko's power. So this pumps out more tokens, which can then be buffed overall by your other counters, and board statuses will improve that way, and it can continuously do that. That's really good, and it's a good synergy card. I like it. Next up, you have the Mana Gorger Hydra, which is a 1/1 Trampler Hydra for 2 generic and 1 green. Whenever you cast a spell, you can put a +1/+1 counter on Mana Gorger Hydra. So this is really, really good. Can really easily grow up to be a huge Hydra. Mossfire Valley, of course. This is one of those land fixers. Mossword Bridge, the Hideaway. Restoration Angel, which is a 3/4 flash flying angel for 3 generic and 1 white. And then when it enters the battlefield, you may exile target non-angel creature you control, then return that card onto the battlefield under your control. Great to re-enable ETBs. Amazing. That's really nice. And also it's a flyer that you can put counters on. Why not? Rishkar Pima Renegade is an elf druid, 2/2 legendary creature for 2 generic and 1 green. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each up to 2 target creatures, and each creature you control with a counter on it has tap to add 1 green mana. This is extremely, extremely good in this color combination. This is definitely something that is going to help a lot because it makes all your counter creatures become mana dorks, and that's amazing. That is really, really good, especially in this color combination. Semester's End is a 3 generic and 1 white instant. Exile any number of target creatures and planeswalkers you control. At the beginning of your next end step, return each of them to the battlefield under its owner's control. Each of them enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it if it's a creature, and an additional loyalty counter if it's a planeswalker, which is good. Re-enables ATBs. You want to do this. Also, maybe as a result of a removal spell, so that's really, really good. It allows you to save any number of creatures, and yeah, re-enables ETBs, or if you're not doing it to save but just to re-enable, you want to do it on creatures that will not lose all the counters, which is kind of self-explanatory, but this is a decent interaction. Definitely a decent interaction. Strionic Resonator is a 2 generic artifact for 2 generic, and tap it. You can copy target ability you control. You may choose new targets for that copy. Wow, this is really good. This is really good. It's fairly cheap for what it does, and you can copy a triggered ability. So that's really, really nice. I really like that. You can definitely pop off with this kind of deck with that. Sungrass Prairie, of course. Sunscorched Regent. So this is a 4/3 dragon for 3 generic and 2 white. Has flying. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature and you gain 1 life. Not bad. I mean, again, there are better cards out there, but it has flying, and whenever it's like the opposite of some of the cards that we discussed, it's really, really good to grow it really quickly. It has flying. I like it, and you also get 1 extra life on top of it, so I like it. I definitely like it. Temple of Abandon, of course. Temple of Plenty. Temple of Triumph. Together Forever. This is an enchantment for 2 white. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you support 2, which means you put a +1/+1 counter on each up to target creatures. Okay, and then for 1 generic, you choose a target creature with a counter on it. When that creature dies this turn, return that card to its owner's hand. This is not a bad synergistic enchantment to prevent your creatures from being completely killed off, and for 1 generic it's not even that expensive. Of course, you might not be able to play it right away, cast it right away for double white, but it's still pretty good in the long run. Then you get Triskelion, of course. This is a classic. This is a 1/1 artifact construct creature for 6 generic, and enters the battlefield with 3+1/+1 counters. You can remove any +1/+1 counters to deal 1 damage to any target. This is way too expensive. It is a classic, but it's way too expensive for what it does. And unless you're going really quickly or infinite creation of tokens, the Triskelion is just more annoying than it is useful, mainly because it's really slow. Next up, you have the command tower and the commander sphere, of course. You have Cultivate, which is another way to ramp up, and that's really good. Search your library for 2 basic lands, up to 2 basic lands. You reveal those cards, put 1 onto the battlefield tap, then 1 into your hand, then shuffle. It's a good sorcery for 2 generic and 1 green. Then we get Evolving Wilds. Of course, I do like the illustration of the Evolving Wilds though. Oh, we get a Fertiled. This is an elemental creature, 0/0 for 2 generic and 1 green. And enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Tap 1 generic and 1 green, remove a +1/+1 counter from it. Target player searches the library for a basic land card, then puts it onto the battlefield tap, then shuffles. It's good to be able to filter out your lands into your deck, but I wonder if this is just a bit too expensive, because I mean, it's taking up a slot of really good synergy cards that tend to have a lot of synergy with counters, and especially +1/+1 counters. So I don't know if I will keep this in, but it's good to have in case you don't have those great cards, because it allows you to, ramp quicker. Fracture Butthole, Power Stone, and for 2 generic, an artifact, you tap to add 1 generic and you roll a Planar die. That's a Planechase Cards. Then we get Kodama's Reach, of course, and yet again another good way to ramp. You search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, put 1 onto the battlefield tapped, and another 1 into your hand. So it's just literally a Cultivate. That's nice. Path of Ancestry, of course. Pride Malkin. This is a cat, 2/1 for 2 generic and 1 green, and it's a really cool cat. When it enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has trample. Now this is really good. This is a very good common for this kind of deck, because you're giving a threat level to your whole entire board, because this way random 1/1 tokens won't be able to just block those huge creatures that you've just created. So this is actually a nice card that I would keep. Ooh, Return to Nature. Choose 1, destroy target artifact or destroy target enchantment, or exile target card from a graveyard. It's 1 generic, 1 green. I would remove this. There are better removals for this kind of color combination, but still, you know. Terramorphic Expanse, Wood Elves. It's a 1/1 scout, elf scout, 2 generic and 1 green, and when it enters the battlefield, you search the library for a forest card, put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Another ramp. There are better ramps, to be fair, so I wouldn't keep that. Abzan Battle Priest is a human cleric for 3 generic and 1 white. It's a 3/2, has Outlast 1 white, and for 1 white you tap it, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and you can only do this as a sorcery, and each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has lifelink. Another good board-wide ability. I really like these. I think this and the other one go hand in hand together with the cat, so I like that. And then this one is similar. It's an Abzan Falconer, 2/3, and it gives each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter flying, so that's really good for 2 generic and 1 white. These 3 cards, the 2 Abzan cards and this cat, are definitely something that I would play. Of course, there are very strong cards out there that enable +1/+1 counters. The thing is, you're putting the threat on the board at such a high level when you have something that it's kind of like a Chroma's Memorial, right? Or a Chroma's Will. You are just putting the threat so high and making even the smallest of creatures very annoying. So that's really good. Alaru, Solemn Ritualist, is a 3/3 human monk legendary creature for 4 generic and 1 white. When it enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 other target creatures, and whenever a non-token creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, you create a 1/1 spirit creature token with flying. It has partner. not bad. It again, more of the same synergistic stuff, but realistically this is too expensive for what it does. It's a trick, like a token generation. There are much better ones. Yes, it's a token generation that can help with giving 2 +1/+1 counters, but yeah, it's something that I maybe would cut out. Arcane Signet, of course, back in fashion as usual. Armorcraft Judge is an elf artificer, 3/3 for 3 generic 1 green. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. This is very, very good in this kind of deck. Then you get Brawn, which is a 3/3 incarnation for 3 generic 1 green. It has trample, and so long as Brawn is in your graveyard and you control a forest, creatures you control have trample. I mean, this is another one. Again, I wouldn't use maybe all of them, but it's not bad. It's definitely something you can keep in mind to keep inside if you don't want to keep one of the other ones, or you know, necessarily if you don't have anything that can give board wide threats. This is okay for that, but I wouldn't keep all of them because then you're starting to lose a lot of slots with the +1/+1 counter interactions. Redegar Stronghold and enters the battlefield tapped, and you tap it to add a green, and then for 1 generic and 2 green, you tap this to put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures you control. They gain vigilance and lifelink till the end of turn and activate only as a sorcery. You know, see, for example, this is a better card than Alaru. It does similar stuff at the very beginning, and it's a land, it stays there, it's hardly ever going to get removed, and it continuously allows you to pump up your creatures. So that's something that I would think of keeping over the creature proper. Conclave Mentor is a 2/2 center cleric. If one or more +1/+1 counters will be put on creatures you control, that many +1/+1 counters are put on that creature instead, and when it does, you gain life equal to its power. Very good card, very synergistic. This is the kind of card that you want, that allows you to put triggers when you put a counter on. So there are quite a few of these. There are some very expensive ones, but this is the kind of synergy that you want to look out for when rebuilding the deck. Constable of the Realm is a 3/3 giant soldier with renown 2 for 4 generic and 1 might. And renown says that when this creature deals combat damage to a player, if it isn't renowned, you put up to 2 +1/+1 counters on it. It becomes renowned, and whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on this creature, you exile up to 1 other target non-land permanent until this card leaves the battlefield. Too expensive for what it's doing. Too much text for just a prison. It's just not worth it. Least Scale Guard is a 2/3 human soldier. When it enters the battlefield, you bolster 2, so you choose a creature with the least toughness among creatures you control, and you put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. 4 generic and 1 white, and whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it attacks, tap target creature defending player controls. Not bad, but it is extremely expensive for what it is trying to do. Endurance Scale Lord is a 4/4 flying dragon for 4 generic and 1 white, 1 green, and whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put onto another creature you control, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Endurance Scale Lord. Very expensive for what it's doing, and it doesn't have board-wide synergy because it's only putting a counter on himself. There are better cards for much cheaper. Falknorth Exterminator, okay, I love this art. He's a vampire archer, 1/1 for 1 generic and 1 red. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you put a +1/+1 counter on this card, and then for 2 generic and 1 red, it deals damage to target creature equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on the Exterminator. Actually, this is not a bad removal because it's a removal that stays on the board and it keeps growing, and yeah, definitely something that is not bad at all. Field of Ruin, this is a classic, of course, if you want to annoy your opponents. Generous Gift, again, removals, they are better. It's okay. It's something. I will say that the removals in this deck have been kind of meh so far. Good Fortune Unicorn, except for like stuff like that, the Falconer. Good Fortune Unicorn is a 2/2 unicorn, 1 generic, 1 green, 1 white, and whenever another creature is into battlefield on your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. See? Yeah, there you go. There are better counter interactions and EDBs than certain cards that we've seen so far, so definitely better this one than the other one. Hamza, the Guardian of Arshin, is a 5/5 elephant warrior for 4 generic, 1 green and 1 white, and he looks cool and badass as hell. I'd love to have him as a friend. He looks like he can bench press a truck. Anyway, So this legendary creature costs 1 generic glass to cast for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it, making it very good because it can easily cost 3 or 2, so that's really good. And then creature spells you cast cost 1 generic glass to cast for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. I love the synergy with this deck. Really good synergy. I like it. See, this is the thing compared to the Convoke deck. Here it's much better thought out. Yes, there are better cards for ETBs and triggers and counters and duplication of counters. I agree with that, but for a pre-con, this is a much more intelligent and even looks much more fun than the Convoke. The Convoke deck just didn't make sense for most of the part. Hinder Vines is an instant, so this is going to be a fog kind of effect for 2 generic and 1 green. You prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures with no +1/+1 counters on them. There are better fog interactions. It's not my cup of tea. Inspiring Call is an instant. You draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Those creatures gain indestructible until the end of turn. This is a very good draw engine. Well, not engine, but draw step. This is a very good cantrip. Very good. I like that one. In this deck, Jungle Shrine, of course, enters the battlefield tapped. Love the art, by the way. Really cool. Juniper Order Ranger. He's a human knight, 3 generic, and 1 green and 1 white. Is a 2/4. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on that creature and on him. This is very good, but it's still very expensive. So I'm gonna move away slowly from that. I'll give you my opinions at the end. Anyway, Cross and Verge, of course. Llanowar Reborn, okay. It has Graph 1, which means that whenever this land enters the battlefield, it gets a +1/+1 counter on it, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you may move a +1/+1 counter from this land onto it. So you can find a way to double or add more counters to this with other synergies. You can definitely keep having kind of like an Ozolith type thing here. Mindless Automaton. I was wondering if we'd see any of those. As a 0/0 construct for 4 generic artifact creature, enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, and then for 1 generic and discard a card, you can put a counter on him and then remove 2 counters from him to draw a card. Now the first part is not that great, right? The discard, it's okay. It allows you to put a 1 counter. What interests me is this last part, and if you can find a way to, let's say, cheat in more counters, again, there are plenty of triggers to do that, then this could be a good draw engine. Now, there are better draw engines out there, but, if you're looking at, well, what could I do with those extra draw counter engines, then definitely this could be something to keep in mind. It's not a bad card, but if you don't have those counter engines, then yeah, definitely don't play it. Rock's Passage, Slurk All Ingesting. Okay, All Ingesting, Wawiwa. And it's a 0/0 ooze for 5 generic and 1 green. This is about with 5 counters on it, +1/+1, and then whenever it or another creature you control dies, if it had any +1/+1 counters, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control that has a +1/+1 counter. It has partner too expensive for what it's doing. Soul Ring, Source to Plowshares, very good removal. Temples of the False God, I don't like it. And then we get to the lands. So you get 5 plains, you get 2 mountains, and then you get 6 forests. That's not bad at all. And lastly, let's have a look here. We have Bright Palm in the normal foiling. This is our commander. And then we get Shalai and Halar. It's a 3/3 Angel Elf. For 1 generic, 1 red, 1 green, 1 white. It has flying, it has vigilance, and whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, Shalai and Halar deals damage to a target opponent. Now this is not a bad interaction because this is a damage to an opponent. Again, if you're going to be quicker on, and then you get the little rule, and so if you want to be quicker on the board, maybe don't play it, but it's not a bad interaction. Now, what do I think of the deck? A deck in and of itself has a lot of synergy and it's really well thought out. Of course, they left out some key cards that you'll have to get especially counter generation or trigger generation. You know, Elish Norn. Doubling Season as well will be a card that will be definitely something worth investing to get into this kind of deck when you're creating it. Yeah, there are some cards that I wouldn't keep in here that don't really make a lot of sense or just have some synergy with, well, themselves and just another card. Maybe those ones, if you have a lot of other great counter generation cards or +1/+1 or EDBs, those are very good, so definitely play them in here. The Ozolith is one of those things that I would just definitely put in here. Yeah, it's a good deck. It seems to me though that it is lacking a bit onto the removal side. It doesn't have a lot of board wipes, which again, you don't want to do too many board wipes, but I would have put the I don't remember off the top of my head, but the instant that you can convoke that protects basically your whole entire side from any destruction spell is really good. For example, there are a lot of other removals or protection spells that I would use here. The sorceries aren't bad. It's, you know, what I would say another thing is like you want to focus a little bit more on what you want to do. So are you trying to go big or are you trying to go small and wide, right? Because the way that I see this deck working really well is if you're going for a few big creatures, but mostly small creatures that become really big and really dangerous, and there are quite a like oozes and stuff like that that can help you achieve it. And instead, if you're going to go onto the side of, well, I'm gonna go with big and strong, then of course you want to go and add more ways to fetch cards and lands onto the battlefield so you can ramp much quicker. And of course there are a lot of mana doors to do that as well, and those mana doors as well can become stronger, and eventually, as I said, you have some board effects and it just hits to the face. So realistically, it's not a bad deck at all. I think I gave the Siddharth Jabari deck a 7.5. I give this an overall 6 or 6.5 to the deck. It is definitely a very good synergy. It is well thought out and it looks fun to play. And yeah, even though it's gonna be slow, and this is the problem, if you're not gonna be enjoying yourself as much because they're gonna go to your face, if they go to your face, then you're gonna be, well, in trouble until you can build your army. But other than that, yeah, really enjoyed the deck. And that's it for today from Scotty and I. Thank you very much for your time. We wish you a lovely day, a blessed day. Be good, be kind, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!